So, in the root chakra understanding of such matters of ancestral grief or ancestral karma, so what happens when we start doing a practice like yoga is that we're accessing our energetic wisdom through the physical body. And this month in particular, we've been going into the root chakra, which is really this primordial seat of everything that's come before you. And it's not just this lifetime or our epigenetic chain, but it's also very much, it's like past lives. And if you believe in such things, then it's very much, beyond. It's like you kind of coming through the ancestry. But on a very practical level, from the epigenetic and scientific sense of it now, it's been proven that these triggers, our genetic information, our DNA changes based on the switches that get flipped due to certain traumas and what happens. It's not just trauma that we kind of think of trauma like, oh, there was a some lineage issue, or that there was some abuse issue. Why does alcoholism continue? If I myself did not experience trauma, why am I more at risk for alcoholism if I didn't go through that? So sometimes this is where, as an adult child of an alcoholic, I have a higher rate, but from a genetic predisposition, I have this in my family, and it's on both sides. And then when we start to see in this book, this beautiful book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, Francis Weller, I believe is his name. He's a pioneer in grief processing work. And the five gates of grief, we could talk and just have an entire workshop about that. But the final gate of grief is this ancestral grief, where sometimes we don't understand what it is that we're processing, what's kind of coming through our own experience, why we get hit with these new waves of feelings or sorrow or dread or fear. And it can be very much because in our yoga practice, we're clearing up the kind of static and energetic backlog of our own lives. And then, oh, look, you did the work. Now you get to clean up the mess for the others. And it can be really disheartening and kind of overwhelming, because when I think I've made some new headway with my grief processing, something else appears. And why? It's like, what is this? I didn't think that this was mine. Why am I still feeling this? Obviously my mother only died 4 months ago, and it was pretty sudden. But what I'm processing now is more like the grief of her life that she didn't get to live. So I'm feeling all of this sadness around how she was not really supported the way that she should have been, that her childhood was kind of left unsaid in terms of her traumas, and that there was really not a whole lot that she could do to do that work, and that I'm feeling all of this disappointment and anger, tons of anger, around how she didn't really get what she needed. And then I start feeling it from my father. And then I start feeling it from my grandparents. And then I start thinking about the grandparents and the great-grandparents, the generations that I didn't even know, how hard it was for them to come from Ireland during a potato famine, how hard it was for them to make it over here from Sicily and Naples in crushing poverty. Had nothing. They had absolutely nothing. They lived 9 children. My grandmother was one of 9, and they lived in Brooklyn, and where the cloaking kind of secrecy around where my great-grandfather came from, they married under my great-grandmother's maiden name, because he had said, well, I left behind a family, I don't want them to find me, because I found out that my child wasn't mine. So then I left, and I don't want there to be a trace. So we don't even know the name. We think it's Sete. Maybe. It's Parisi was the name that she married under, but we really don't know. So all of these stories, these ancestral griefs, and then the squashing of our culture. Sometimes what happened, the food culture sustained. Hey, Italian food culture, you can't really get away from it. But that's about it. They did not teach the language to their children because they didn't want them to be discriminated against. They felt that their accent was actually really, and at the time, during, back when they emigrated, like Italians and the Irish, they were just completely, they were, it was like the dirty guineas, the dirty wops, the dirty mix. It was like you need not apply. And then my grandfather, Kenneth Doyle, married Amalia Parisi. So now we have the ancestral karmas of they were against each other. They hated each other in that time in Brooklyn. It was like, oh, you stay over here, you stay over there. But then somehow they married, and that's kind of like the Capulets and the Montagues getting together. And then all of the ancestral karma that kind of comes with that. They were not welcomed. They had to get married in secret. They then were shunned by their family because they got married in secret at City Hall, and then my great-grandparents were embarrassed because they didn't do it in a church. So then they pretended that they were getting married in a church, and my great-grandparents made them get dressed up in like a wedding gown that they borrowed and take pictures outside. And that was the wedding photo that sat on the piano for all of the years that we knew. Oh, that's Nanny and Poppy's wedding photo. And my grandmother would always Nanny would say, oh, well, that was the fake photo that we had to do because my mother was embarrassed. And then we had to pretend like we had a church wedding. And it's so interesting, that shame, that ancestral shame that kind of comes through with it. And in this book, really talking about some of the disembodied pieces that you may start to feel. If you're really doing the work, and this month maybe you've been, churning up some unfortunate, it's like, oh, how much sadness is there? Is there more? It's like, can I just let go of this? Can I just kind of get into feeling a sense of like goodness and connection to myself? Sometimes we have to, clean up that karmic baggage. And it's not pleasant, but the relief that will kind of come through it is also through creating your own personal rituals. So in the book, this woman in particular that Frances was working with, she felt a lot of lifetime disconnection to her sensuality and her sexuality specifically. And she realized that after she was working in therapy and she was working in somatic therapy and she was doing all of this stuff, she realized, well, my mother was actually frigid and so were my aunts, and that then it became this, this is who we are. We are these women in our family we were stoic, we were pious. This is not something that you do. That's shameful. Your erotic nature is something that needs to be disconnected from and kept in check. This is it's not something to be celebrated. It's something to be denied. And that's your birthright, is to deny that and carry the torch of sacrifice and self-sacrifice, because that's not safe and that energy isn't good. And when she finally unpacked it and realized, well, wait a second, is that mine? Because she felt all of those years that it was her own, but she had not been traumatized. She had not felt that way. She was not abused. She did not feel this, this energy of like denial, and yet she was repulsed by sexual connection, and she really didn't feel kind of at home in her skin. And the more that she did this work with this grief processor, this Frances Weller, who was holding the space for her, the more fresh it was kind of coming up. And she didn't realize, she's like, why am I so repulsed by this energy? I don't understand where it's coming from. And that's when he said, well, maybe it's not yours. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's something that you need to do this work, is to heal it not just for yourself, but for the women who have come before you. So he said, well, create a ritual for yourself, whatever that means to you. So she kind of sat with it and instinctively, what does it mean to kind of create a ritual? There can be some physical component to it, it can be a part of a yogic process. It can be part of journaling. When we had our grief ritual here, where that Elizabeth, came to hold, we put our heavy, some heavy memories, some heavy feelings in these stones. And then the stones were submerged in water so that we could really cleanse them. And we put the blessings of rose petals and from my mother's funeral. And, there was just this really beautiful energy of being able to kind of bless what was heavy inside of us and then to be able to release them. I buried the stones in my yard around my tree so it will nourish it. And it's like, this is where we can take and transmute these energies. This woman in this in the ritual in the book, she took herself to the beach. She was by herself. She was journaling and kind of like writing out all of the heavy energy and all of the ways that she kind of felt denied or disconnected from her sexuality. And after a while, it started to move. And then she started sweating profusely. And then she felt nauseous. And then she realized, okay, it's coming through my body. Some of this stuff, it's like it will trigger that. You may go through, right, these feelings of like, I just feel like I'm going to throw up all the time, or I just feel like I need to cry and sleep, or I don't really know, I don't even want to talk about it. I just want to kind of be in the energy and bury myself, or throw myself in the ocean, or burn something in a fire, or bury it in my backyard, or do something. So you can kind of create your own ritual. What's the energy that's up for you in it? And then when you do, you give it some sort of a tangible, concrete thing that you can attach these emotions and energy to, and then release it. Be free of it. Because then, once she did that, she said, I think to myself, my conscious mind says, I've been carrying around this stuff for a lifetime. Do you really think it's going to go away by doing some ritual at the beach? She said, honestly, it's been 2 months, and every day since then, I wrote all these things. I sweat it all out. I felt this like disgust in my body and wanting to kind of release it. I wrote all of the words that were the hottest triggers on the heaviest, biggest stone I could find in marker. I stripped down. I went into the water. I threw the rock as far as I could. And then I submerged in the waters again and just felt myself kind of being reborn. And then when I came out, I laid down on the sand and rolled around in it and kind of like made myself, get all kind of roughed up, but kind of texturally and sensitively awoken again. And then since then, she's felt this new, sense of purpose and connection to her energy that's hers. She doesn't feel the heaviness from her ancestors anymore. Now she feels like she's really reclaimed it, and then it's her own life now. So these things don't have to be years of processing and therapy. It doesn't have to be a painful, horrible, drag out, process. It can actually be something that if you're willing to do the sitting with it work, it will kind of reveal itself. So as you practice today, maybe set some intention for how that you're picking up the cues of what's coming through your body this month. Because we're working in the root chakra so much, it's very close to our sexual nature is a part of this energy, which is also why we're kind of talking about it now more so as we're going to then crest into sacral chakra month, because that is the place for pleasure in our body. This is the place for our sensual connection to ourselves and also the world around us and being alive as creative sexual beings. It's not just about sex, it's also about your creative life force. Sexual energy is creative energy. So when we have the time to really contemplate it, maybe we'll also find some of those shadow energies that need to be expressed that aren't yours. Maybe you have been, denying an aspect of yourself or have told yourself that this is who you are, and it isn't. It's actually something that you've carried forward. So in that way, when we allow ourselves to kind of open up to the insight that can come through, don't think too much about it. Feel where it hits. Is it making you sick? Do I feel uncomfortable? Is this making me edgy? Do I feel, does my brain override it and then I get restless and think about anything else? Those are all really good signs that you're in the right spot. That's something like your ego is pretty clever and it's really designed to keep you safe. So when we're uncomfortable and we start to kind of like squirm, that's a spot. Then that's an energy that we need to work with. And as we go into sacral chakra, it's also about these deeper forward folds, moving deeper inside of yourself. If forward folds is a place where you start to tune out, get restless, get bored, squirm, we don't really like to be in that energy, there's a sign. Something in your sacral chakra is kind of coming out and wanting to be, witnessed and seen. So just receive the energy however you can and also make it a safe place to be in your body. This is a root chakra understanding, is to make your body a sacred vessel for this energy, and it's safe to be in it. It's safe to be in the skin that you're in right now, right here. And it's actually possible to take this like yucky feeling, and then on the other side of it is a lot of pleasure and freedom if we do the work. If you're not ready yet, that's okay. First, we just see it. You have to actually know what needs to be changed before we can even change it. So that's another aspect of this month, is to just kind of take stock, recognizing where you are in your body and that it really is okay. It's safe to be here. You can trust this process. It may not be yours. The feelings that you're carrying that are so terrifying might actually be presenting themselves to be healed from something before you. And if that's the case, then we can make it an embodied prayer. I'm strong enough to break this karmic chain. I'm actually able to do this work that my ancestors could not. When we think about that, my meditation teacher, Lauren Roche, he often says, whenever we're in this beautiful retreat center in Kripalu in Massachusetts, and we're all there for this lovely 5-day meditation retreat, and he says, now I just want you to contemplate for a few minutes. This can be your meditation practice. You are living your ancestors' answered prayers. Here I am. I am living this answered prayer. They fled where they were so that I could have this life. That was better. That was in a place that I could actually be strong enough to break it. So I'm starting to do the work of like really reclaiming. And then when we do that, we're not just healing ourselves and freeing up ourselves, but we are actually healing the past. We can then honor our ancestral lineage. And in that way too, what we've been cut off from, start to go back. If you haven't learned about your ancestry, this is a really good time to do that. 23andMe or Ancestry.com or any of these things, it's really good to kind of find out and then do some research. Maybe learn the language, maybe read the mythology, maybe understand where you've come from, these places where you've hailed from. Maybe think about visiting, these places where your ancestors are from, because it's when you return to the motherland, so to speak, you will get an ancient kind of tremor of recognition. I only drove through Naples, and I felt it. And then I understood, oh, this is why I feel at home in Manhattan. Naples feels like a crumbling old version of Manhattan in like 1920, with like the laundry that still hangs out the windows and the dogs that are roaming everywhere and the people and their warmth and their hospitality. It's like there's just this energy within communities that are still like that, highly populated in that. And in Greece, it feels very similar. It's a very Mediterranean energy. So when I felt that, it was like, yes, this ancient tremor of like remembrance. So we can also ask for guidance to that. Maybe set some intention to have it revealed. What ancestry do you want to kind of check out and then reclaim and then bring it back in? Your food traditions, your just, and connect with your children. It's like, do your family tree. Really ask the people who are still alive, what do they remember? What are those little secrets, those little stories that maybe when you were young they couldn't tell you? Now I can't ask my mom any more of those stories. My aunt's still alive, but and my aunt, I think she got most of them, so I could probably sit down and spend some time with her. But for the most part, these lines are dying, so it's time to reclaim them and then to bring them back in to your life. And it's a really powerful way to kind of do the healing work. So let's close our eyes and come inside and get really grounded in that. And just notice if you have any kind of like tremor in recognition, or maybe it's a little scary to think about going back into that. Acknowledge and honor what's up for you in this moment. Any grief that's really present that you're aware of, but also to be open to receive the guidance, to really open to the safety of doing this work. So you ground down through the seat and lift up through the crown, unhinge your jaw. You feel your hands resting lightly on your legs. Your palms can be facing down if you need a little extra commitment and safety. It's safe to be in this body. we feel open and grounded already, then you can turn your palms facing up, lightly join the tip of the thumb and the forefinger together, forming Jnana Mudra, the mudra of self-awareness. Notice if you have any aches or pains, any chronic conditions. What's the state of your union today? Quiet witnessing without judgment. And we connect to the breath as you inhale, really flood the body all the way down to the pelvic floor. And then gush it out. Letting go. Do that 2 more times. Sound or sigh if it feels warranted. And then layer in your deep Ujjayi breathing. Ujjayi is an oceanic sound constricting the back of the throat on the inhales or the exhales, will generate some internal heat, help you to burn through what you are churning up. It will also keep you focused and present throughout the class, I will remind you. So we set our collective intentions to be here. We make it safe to reveal these ancestral griefs that need to be integrated. And we make our body a safe vessel for our spirit to come back in. And we open the practice by chanting Om 3 times together. Inhale deeply for Om. Om.